Hello, everyone. Yes. So we have just discussed a few things about literary agent, traditional publishing, self-publishing, and now we're coming up to the point of talking about a bit more about editors. And also when we talked about traditional publishing, we mentioned literary agents. So we're going to have Diane Glazman, who is an editor and was formerly a reader for a literary agent. Would you like to tell her to introduce herself?
Oh, yes. Diane, can you introduce yourself?
So I'm Diane Glazman. I am both a writer and I am also a book editor. I'm a developmental book editor. My background also includes that for 2.5 years, I worked for a literary agent and I was her submissions reader and her editor for some of the manuscripts that she was working on. So I've looked at over 1,200 query letters, first 50 pages and synopses while I was working for her, and I, edited several manuscripts as well. Wow. So, and then for the past 5 years, in addition to my own writing, I have been working as a developmental editor on other people's books.
Wow, that's very interesting. Like seriously, and you said that you were a developmental editor. So what type of editors are there out there?
Other than developmental, of course.
And what is?
So there are pretty much, there are 3 main types. There's a developmental editor who works on structural issues mainly. So that's like the big picture stuff is, we look at the narrative arc, we look at the character arc, we look at how the various elements of the novel fit together and how best to get them working to create a cohesive novel effect. And then there are line editors who deal with language. So after you've got your structure put together, these are the people who will go through and really fine tune your language so that, and it's not just like proofreading and looking at grammatical errors. It's really kind of getting down and looking at a sentence by sentence level of how your sentences function together and where they're flowing well and when they're not, and when something in the structure of the sentence is actually impacting either the clarity or the way in which the narrative flows. And then you have copy editors who are the ones who are kind of looking more stylistically. Those are the ones that's kind of like copy editors. They aren't proofreaders, but they kind of function as kind of like a super level proofreading, because they are looking at grammatical errors, they're looking for spelling errors, they're looking for typos, but they're also looking to make sure that the work is stylistically consistent and correct. So those are the 3 main types of editors. And then when you get into publishing, there are other things. We talk about publishing editors, and those are mainly what's known as acquiring editors. So they're the ones who buy the book from, when buy your book, and then take you through the whole entire publication process. But when we're talking about like editors who work in the development of the manuscript, we're talking about mainly either developmental editors, line editors, or copy editors.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. I mean, I felt like I learned a lot already. So what should a writer look for in an editor?
I think the main thing that you're looking for, especially if you're looking at a developmental or a line editor, is someone who really gets your work, who understands it, who understands what your vision is and what you're trying to do with the book, and can work with you and with what you've already written, so that they can help you get it to be the best that it can possibly be. I suggest always asking any editor that you're going to work with if they're willing to do some sample pages, about 10 pages, so that you can see what they're doing, what they're picking up on, and get an idea of how well you're going to work together. You can also, I've had, meetings with potential clients to talk over, like, we'll talk for about an hour about what they want to do with their book, and kind of give me an idea of where they're having issues with it. And then, and then I'll still do like a 10-page sample or 20-page sample to give them an idea of how I'm going to work with their book. And one of the things also, it's not always about working with the editor who has the most successful list of clients. It's about finding an editor who can successfully edit your book. It's not really so much about what they've already edited and how well that's done, but what they can do with your book itself.
Wow, that was an amazing point.
So
Appreciate
far,
that.
I love how you've mentioned editors for both self-publishing and traditional, and then how you've gone to tell us how we can successfully find an editor. Thank you so much for the answers. My next question is about your work as a reader for a literary agent, a submission reader for a literary agent. I'm sure you've read thousands of manuscripts, and what key areas did you find that are often in manuscripts that make it it unattractive to an agent? Oh my word.
Unattractive or attractive.
Yeah. To an agent.
First and foremost, when you're querying an agent, make sure that you are querying with the kind of thing that they represent. One really heartbreaking example of not quite getting it right was this one manuscript that came in, and that when I was reading for the literary agent, and it was wonderful. It was an amazing book. The first 50 pages were great. I recommended that that the agent request the full, and I'm reading through the full, and about 100 pages in, it became very clear that while the writer had said it was a mystery, it actually was a thriller. The agent that I was reading for didn't represent thrillers. Fantastic book, but wrong agent. She doesn't, and the reason it's the wrong agent is because agents know specific editors. They represent books within specific genres, and even within genres, like the agent that I worked with, she specialized in cozy mysteries. So even though she represented mysteries, what she really loved and where she had the bulk of her contacts were within editors who acquired cozy mysteries. And the same way that writers are cold querying agents, if an agent doesn't have an existing relationship with an editor, and they don't know what an editor wants to buy, they're just cold querying the editors at the publishing houses the same way. And we all know, if you're a querying writer, you know what your success rate is. And so that's why you really need to pay attention to what does this agent represent first and foremost. That's the first thing. Know what your genre is. But in terms of assuming you've got all that down, the single most important thing when you're querying an agent is what your pages look like. We spend a lot of time talking about query letters. Agents talk a lot about well, this was a successful query letter. My feeling on that, and especially after having been on the agent side of the desk, is that yes, your query letter is important, but I think the reason that a lot of agents present this is the effective query letter is because it is a very small piece of writing that you can give actionable feedback to writers in a very short amount of time. And the other thing is that problems that exist in the query letter are almost guaranteed 95% of the time. If there's a problem in the query letter, it's going to show up in the manuscript. So if the query letter is long and vague, the manuscript is probably going to also have a higher word count and also be vague and not quite as fully developed as it should be in order to be published. And so that's one of the reasons, you do want to make sure that your query letter is well written, because you don't want the agent to go to your pages already having an idea of well, these are the problems that I'm going to find, and now I'm reading until I get to the point where I know that I'm right. So they're reading with confirmation bias at that point. And so you don't want them in that space. You want to give them what the central conflict is. You want to give them something about your main characters, and you want to present it in a dynamic way so that when they get to the pages, they're interested, they're engaged, not looking for reasons that I'm going to reject this manuscript. And and I lost my thought.
Those were fabulous. Yeah. Seriously.
Well, yeah, but in terms of like I said, the most important thing when you're querying is your opening pages. because that's obviously what an agent is going to ask for first. And that, and that's really the thing that will sell your book and that will get you representation or an offer of representation has nothing to do with your query letter. It is all what's in the pages. And so you need to make sure that your opening pages are they're dynamic. Are they presenting a destabilizing incident in the opening pages? This is especially crucial if you're writing more commercial or upmarket. And I'm talking mainly about fiction because that's what I know. But it's like, especially with commercial fiction, you better have a destabilizing incident on that first page and start in a really dynamic space because commercial fiction has a very high pace to it. Upmarket fiction, you can kind of get away with a little bit more character development, but you still need to get into, this is a story that is moving, it's in progress, and there's a story that's being told already. Literary fiction has a little bit more leeway because it's based more on the language and the effects of the language. But if you look at what is considered to be literary fiction and what's selling as literary fiction, generally those books still are faster paced, and there usually is a destabilizing incident, at least within the first 5 pages. And what that means is basically the destabilizing incident is, this is the thing that is telling the reader what's about to change. Here's what the character's normal world is like. This is the thing that knocks them off balance. So when the thing that comes in, that's the inciting incident, which causes the story to be put into motion, that they are off balance enough that the inciting incident knocks them over and pushes them into this new way of thinking, these new experiences. That's where your story gets started. But it really is important. It's like, don't start in a static place. You want to look to what's in motion in the story and what's about to change. And that's where you want your story to start. If you're starting your story, and I mean, this is one of the things, like agents see this all the time, and you can actually do a search on, openings that agents don't want to see any more of, or cliched openings, or whatever, or like, the top 10 things that agents see too much of in manuscripts. So you're staying away from cliched openings, and like the number one is character wakes up in bed. And especially character wakes up in bed and then ponders their life and how they got to this point for the next 10 pages. And it's like, that is completely static, and agents have seen it 1,000 times already. So it's like, you want to start in a dynamic place. And you also want to be, especially in those first 10 pages, you want to be really careful about just kind of real intense dumps of backstory. One of the things that I look at when I'm editing is that I see a lot of times where people, like, they open, do a couple of pages where things are in motion, and then they immediately go into backstory for like 10 pages. And what that is about is that those are the things the writer needed to know about the character as they were, or about the situation, in order to write the rest of the story. But the reader doesn't actually need to know those things right there. And so that's why a lot of times it's like, if you're finding yourself that you have all this information that you are absolutely like, has to be in the opening, don't do this, backward jump to explain everything in exposition. Figure out, how is this character starting, how are they acting out of the effect of the backstory? Because who we are now is the culmination of everything that's come before it. We act out of those things. We react to things because of our prior experience. So if somebody has a bad relationship with a sibling, I, as the reader, don't need to know all the details about everything that went on between these two siblings in their lives. What I need to see in that opening is, I need to see how they are interacting right now. Where are the fault lines? I need to see that the writer, like, and this is as an agent, as I need to see that the writer has this really comprehensive understanding of who their characters are, and that they are in control of their story. And the way you demonstrate that is that you every single word, every single element in those, especially in those opening pages, is working in service towards getting the story forward. And you're demonstrating that it's like, I know who this character is, I know what the story is, here's our starting point, and I'm going to show you who this person is by how they act and react.
Diane, can you quickly just give us 2 examples of what were perfect opening pages, and then just as fast as you can, why?
Yeah.
I know one of the opening pages that you love, and I love when you explain it. Yes.
The Hunger Games.
Yes.
Yeah, the Hunger Games is a masterclass in an opening. I mean, in the first 500 words, you get an understanding of who Katniss is. You get an understanding of things that are relevant to her in the story. And Collins has this detail that Katniss's sister brought home a cat when it was a kitten, and Katniss tried to drown it because it was one extra mouth too many in order to be able to support. And that's the detail. But the understanding of what that detail means is this family is so poor that they don't even have enough extra food to feed a cat. Mm-hmm. And you can see the Katniss, the way her brain works, the logic, and the fact that emotion is a luxury that she can't afford. She's cold, she's a realist, she makes decisions and she sticks by them, and emotions don't enter into it. And that, and then you also have, in those first 500 pages, you have, it opens with like her sister is not sleeping well, and of course she's not sleeping well because it's the day of the reaping. And Collins doesn't explain what it is, but you know that it's bad because people are not sleeping well. And she doesn't give you a whole bunch of history about how how the Hunger Games came about until it becomes necessary in the story for the reader to understand what the games are. It's just enough to know that there's something that's threatening that's going to happen. And that's, like I said, 500 words. It's a masterclass in a dynamic opening.
So if you're listening to this, go pick that up and
Yes.
reread those 500 words.
Yeah.
We're running out of time with
yeah, I know.
Okay, last question.
So can you tell us about your writing experiences and why you chose to do the self-publishing route?
Sure. So up until about 2 years ago, I was a very serious literary novelist, very focused on getting literary work published. I have a BA and an MFA in fiction. And I was taking, in 2018, I was taking part in a fairly prestigious novel writing workshop and it was a year long, ended in 2019. And at the time I had the literary novel, and I also had this other really fun project that I was working on, which was a gay romance. And it was just something fun that I was working on. And I kind of sized these two things up, and I had a couple of experiences, some frustrating gatekeeping experiences with the literary novel that I kind of like looked coming at the end, down to the end of 2019, and I was like, the romance novel is really fun, and I really want to finish something. I want to finish a novel, and so I started working more on the romance novel, and then realized, hey, I've actually got a pretty good book here. And so I started looking, and I was like, well, I can put it up on Amazon. And then I started to investigate self-publishing and found some tremendous resources. And I was like, okay, I can do this. This is actually really interesting to me. And what I started seeing about it was also the fact that things like gay romance is a very small niche in the romance genre. It's not profitable yet for traditional publishing to publish it because the readership isn't quite as big. And so what I was looking at indie publishing is that it really does a great job of exploiting these niches in readership where there isn't a big enough market yet for traditional publishing to go into. Because traditional publishing actually, the number that I've researched and figured out is that any book that is published, any fiction that's published by a traditional publisher has to make a minimum of about $250,000. That's not counting any advance that the writer gets So if you've got a $250,000 advance on top of the $250,000 for the production costs, then you're talking your book has to earn back $500,000 in order for it to be profitable for the publishing company. And so indie publishing actually has this ability to exploit niches, because like I spend about $2,000 per title on my books. So I'm, my break even point is a lot lower. And what I really, and so I love, so I, like I said, I started pursuing it. I published my first book in January of this year, and my second book was in March, and then my third book came out last week. And I'm hoping to have at least another book out this year and another novella. And so what I love the most about it is just I have a lot of control over my work. So, I mean, I am the one, I have not done it as on a shoestring. I have hired professional cover designers. I have hired professional editors. I have hired professional proofreaders and formatters. And I have also hired a couple of times some marketing people to help me out with various promotions. And I've also gotten to know my author community really well and gotten involved with them. And the male romance community has an incredibly active author community that's really supportive and very helpful. Because the other thing that I've discovered about indie publishing is that we recognize that the more we can build the readership and the more we can work together, the better it is for all of us. And so there's a group called 20 Books to 50K, which is a fantastic, it's on Facebook. There's a conference in Las Vegas coming up at the beginning of November for this. It's about 2,000 people, and the Facebook group's about 50,000 or more. And their motto is "A rising tide lifts all boats." And that's I have found that in the indie publishing world is that we're all trying to figure out the way that everybody gets to make a profit on this. And the more that we help other writers to expand the market, the better it is for us. And so that collaborative effort is something that I absolutely adore. And I love the community that I found. And I love having the direct relationship with my readers. At this point, I have a core group of some really, really very enthusiastic and wonderful fans who will read anything that I write at this point. And they are the most encouraging and supportive group of people. And I love them dearly. And I really like being able to have that one-on-one relationship with my readers and to engage them and, do things like I realized one of the main characters of the book that I'm working on right now, he's appeared in the previous 2 books. And I realized I'd never described him. And I was like, oh my God, this is a great opportunity though. So I threw out to my reader group on Facebook that, hey, what do you guys think Alex looks like? Because I realized I don't have a clue. And, I got back several responses, and it was like, that's actually kind of what I had in the back of my head for him, which was really great. But it was also a way to engage my readers and kind of give them some ownership. So I'm going to use some of their suggestions to decide how this character looks.
Well, that's wonderful. And we're so happy for you and all of the journey that you've done. And thank you so much for coming to explain it to us today. Would you tell us where people can reach out to you and find out more about you?
I write under the name Marie Sinclair. So you can look up Marie Sinclair on Amazon. I'm in Amazon and KU exclusively. If you're looking for my editing work, my website is dianeglazman.com. So it's DianeGlazman.com. And that has a lot of information about what I do, how I do it, and what my rates are.
All right. Thank you so much for coming and explaining more to us.
Yes. So now we're going to move on from learning about how to write a book and how to publish a book to we're in self-publishing. Now we're going to talk about how to market our book.
Absolutely. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.